Part 1. The Encounter. Chapter 1. My Friends in the Sky. The academic year 1973 to 1974 had come, and like all the other students I was back in Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon, for the new school year. I lived with my maternal uncle, and it was not a very easy or pleasant life. After a very upsetting and depressing first trimester, I could not wait for the Christmas holidays to come, so that I might go back home to my grandmother. That December, after my end-of-term exams on the 11th, I went back home early to my village. On the 12th, I packed my trunk early in the morning and left. People were quite surprised to see me when I arrived later that afternoon, for all expected their children to arrive by the 20th at the earliest. To all inquiries I replied that I had just wanted to get out of the city. My grandmother was of course very happy to see me, but she too was quite surprised to see me arriving so early, and she set about trying to find out the reason. She was convinced that there was something seriously wrong with me. I finally convinced her that there was nothing to worry about, but she had brought me up and she knew me better than most people, and sometimes better than I even knew myself. And was there something wrong? I was 4 months pregnant. At 11 o'clock in the evening, I stepped outside to enjoy the beautiful sound of silence, as I could only feel it in my village where cars rarely passed, and most people went to bed at 8 o'clock in the evening. The moon was on its second quarter, soon it would be full. Standing there, I thought about my friends in the sky, those who had been there nearly all my life, appearing in their silent, rounded, light-filled flying things most of the times at night, sometimes during the day, when I was alone at the farm. I remembered a few years back, when they had made an exception and had appeared while I was with my grandmother. For once I had been determined to ensure that someone else saw them with me. So I had called her and pointed at the silver-colored object, and I had told her that I had seen such objects a lot of times. Amazingly, she had not appeared as surprised as I had thought she would be. Instead, she looked at it for a while, shading her eyes against the glare of the sun with one hand, the other one placed on her hip, and she had quietly nodded. Then she had muttered, "Yes, I know. I remember there was one just like that in the sky, behind our house the day before you were born, then right above our house the day you were born, and for 5 more days after your birth. We saw it, Solomon and I this evening. I virtually felt a kind of urge to see them. I had the feeling of something missing somewhere in me. I took the antelope skin that had been in the family for generations, lay it in the courtyard and installed myself on it. I lay on my back and scanned the skies, trying to identify the different star groups as my grandfather used to show me when I was little. Dear grandfather Solomon, he had died of cancer and in great pain in 1968. Things had so suddenly changed for me. Soon after his death, my spoilt and pampered lifestyle ended. I had been suddenly thrown into the stark reality of hatred, jealousies, calumnies and criticism, without forgetting hunger and the humiliation of a near-slavish but nevertheless necessary obligation to live with people who did not want me to be with them. I missed my grandfather so much. After 20 minutes of uselessly gazing at the skies, I reasoned that my friends in the flying object had also abandoned me. Now that I was older, they had tired of showing up. I wondered who they were, though I was convinced that they could only be those famous Elian whom my grandfather had told me about so many times in my childhood. Without noticing it, I realized that I had been crying as I thought about him. As I finally decided to go to bed somewhat disappointed, I looked one last time at the stars, and suddenly one of them began to move very slowly towards the west, growing bigger and bigger as it moved. I immediately realized that this was no star, for it came closer and stopped about 1.5 kilometers in the sky above me and switched on a rainbow of lights. My heart began to beat very rapidly, and I stood up, overjoyed, staring at the beautiful object in delight, and suddenly all my sadness left me. They had come. My friends were there. They had not forgotten me. For 15 minutes I looked, marveling at the stunning object. There had never been any doubt in my mind that there were living beings inside those objects. For, though they never made a sound, they always switched lights on and off, changing the colors of the lights, and always flying away after a while. Our village is very far from the departmental city, and the objects could never be mistaken for airplanes, even though we sometimes saw airplanes passing very high up in the distance. Airplanes made a lot of noise and they were very recognizable by their shapes. And they passed once every week. My flying objects, on the contrary, were very different, very unusual, and quite round-shaped, like upside-down bowls. They always had lights flashing on the tops and bottoms of them. Unlike the planes, they were never afraid to come closer to the village, and they could fly straight up when they went away, not horizontally like the airplanes. After 15 minutes the object's lights changed, becoming brighter, and it shot straight up, disappearing within seconds in the heavens. I waited a little while, hoping that they would come back, and then as I saw nothing but the myriad of twinkling stars, I finally picked up the antelope's skin and went back indoors. I went to bed, many thoughts swirling in my mind, each fighting to come to the forefront, and I fell asleep. A shining silver-colored thing in the sky. Morning broke, and I went into the kitchen as usual for the traditional breakfast. And of course my grandmother tried to question me again, determined to know the secret that she was sure I was hiding. But I gave nothing away, and after a while she finally gave up questioning me. After breakfast we got ready to go to the farm. This was the time for weeding the groundnuts. I loved those moments with my grandmother. It was always a pleasure for me to tread the same weedy trails, meeting people on the way and stopping every time for a little chat before continuing. We knew all of them and everyone knew us too. We only had to hear a voice to know whose villager it belonged to. I knew that forest like the inside of my own pockets. I knew every tree, every turning, every field and cocoa plantation, and I knew exactly to whom each belonged. This was my domain where I most loved to be. We arrived at the groundnut farm, and as usual we downed our baskets and tools to give God yet another thank you for having led us safely to the farm and for the protection you will give us all the rest of the day, till you return us home in safety later in the evening. Amen. I did not mind a single bit. I loved my grandmother dearly and I loved her pure heart, and I never got tired of hearing her pray. The prayer finished, we set to work weeding the groundnuts. Later that afternoon at 15.5 hours, as she usually did, my grandmother left me alone to go to another one of our farms to collect all the vegetables she needed for dinner that night. But not before having ordered me to continue working, and lecturing me about my laziness and reluctance, of course. All our actions at the farms had developed into a form of ritual that had never varied over the years. We arrived at the farm and we prayed, then we worked. We posed for half an hour at midday to eat and drink. Then back to work, until 3:30, when my grandmother would leave me alone to disappear for an hour and return with a large basket full of different vegetables. We never did things differently. As soon as she turned her back to go, I put down my hoe and sat myself down under a cassava shrub to dream or sing. One thing that I loved to do when I had the time was to explore the endless cyberspace of my mind, as I called it. In there took place many adventures in which I was both the heroine and the villain, the queen and the slave, the bully and the victim, the evil witch and the good fairy, the good doer and the evil one, the ruler and the subject, the princess and the maid. But always I ended up the winner, for in the beautiful and wonderful world of my mind, I controlled my destiny to suit me, and there never was any real harm or defeat, not only for me and those I loved but to my enemies as well. And when I did not dream, I sang. I had this repertoire of hundreds of songs that I sang over and over again to myself. I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of solitude that I could get. Chewing on a sugar cane, I turned on my side, leant on one elbow and began to think about my grammar school friend Philomen. Then throwing back my head to swallow the sweet juices, I saw one of the silver-colored and shining flying things, so close that I choked on the sugar juice in surprise. I coughed violently, my eyes watering, trying to get the juice out of my windpipe, while looking up at the silver object. When I finally stopped coughing, I stood up and for the first time looked properly at it. And I realized that it did not really look like a turned-down bowl. It was more like a bell, flat but just a little bit rounded at the bottom. It was so close that I could clearly see the gold-colored sign that was painted on the bottom and the side of it. It looked like a Star of David. It came even closer and I could hear a very low humming sound coming from it. It had a flashing white light on its top, and a red one at its bottom. The bottom light was placed right in the middle of the large golden Star of David painted on it. As it came closer, I sat back, leaning on both my elbows, and a little frightened. Then suddenly something opened on the side of the otherwise windowless silver bell. It was a window, for I could see shadows moving behind it. It was dark inside with just a bit of light. I thought to myself that whoever was inside had dimmed the lights because they did not want me to see them. As I looked, a very thin white light, like a laser, shot out of it and down toward me. Well, I thought it was toward me, because I instinctively turned my eyes away and protected my head with my raised arm and bent elbow. "Get up, puree," shouted my grandmother's angry voice. "From whom did you inherit that laziness? I left you a bit of weeds to clear away and I still find them here. What have you been doing while I was gone, heh? And what will people think? What will they say in the future, heh? That I did not teach you how to work with your hands? You listen to me, young lady, I don't want anyone going and insulting me wherever you shall go to be married. I don't ever want to hear any of that your rotten mother name-calling." Her voice had startled me. I opened my eyes and I realized that I was lying on my side, curled up in a fetal position. My grandmother was standing above me, a very angry expression on her face. I got on my feet, feeling dizzy, nauseous and disorientated. I felt a bit strange. I did not feel like I had slept, I felt rather lost. "Well," she said. "Come on, let's go home, it is late." We set off for the village, with me walking ahead, not having said anything. What could I say anyway? I realized that a whole hour had passed from the moment I had first seen the flying vessel until my grandmother had come and shouted at me. As she walked behind me, she suddenly asked me, "Did you cut yourself?" I replied that I did not. And she said, "Well, there is something like a blood stain on the back of your dress." She even touched the stain, which was on my lower back. I did not pay too much attention to that and said nothing. There had been so many times in the past when I had found bloodstains on my clothes without having been wounded. I remained quiet all evening, barely eating and not singing or joining in any conversations. My grandmother became worried and asked me if I was ill. I replied that I just felt very tired and wanted to sleep early. And I went to bed at 7 that evening. I said my bedtime prayer and prepared for sleep, installing myself very comfortably on my back. I was restless, turning this way and that, even though I felt quite sleepy. Finally, I realized that I felt a slight pain in my lower back every time I lay on it. Once I understood this, I lay on my stomach and immediately began to fall asleep. Then I felt some sort of click behind my right temple, as if someone had pressed a button, or a light switch or something like that. And then I listened amazed at this speech. "Greetings, you must now be lying down, ready to rest as you hear this message. As you must have guessed, we are the people from the sky, those who pilot the space vessels that you have been seeing since you were little. We have been waiting for you to get older before we could communicate with you. We are Elianan. We are those about whom your grandfather spoke, and we have been watching you since and even before you were born. Now it is necessary for us to tell you why we have been regularly showing ourselves to you and to no other children of your age in your home village. Tomorrow, do not go together with the older lady. Go instead to the cocoa plantation where you usually go, and we shall meet you there at 11 o'clock in the morning, Earth time. Do not worry, we shall help you, there should be no problem." And the voice stopped. This was quite a weird speech, to say the least. Of course, I had become wide awake and had sat upright as soon as I heard the first word. The voice had a metallic sound, as if the speaker were using a microphone. I sat, looking slowly around my bedroom after raising the wick of my lamp, wondering whether my young Uncle Joseph were not hiding in my room and playing one of his practical jokes on me. But the voice that I had heard was a strange one and had spoken in French, while if it had been Joseph, surely he would have spoken Yuando, our mother tongue. And furthermore, the voice had not sounded like his at all. To make sure, I decided to see if I would hear the same speech again. So I lay down again and concentrated strongly, calmed myself down and began breathing rhythmically. Then I did it again. I sort of stopped breathing for a second, brought my teeth together, and just switched the click on again. I did not know how I knew how to do it, but I just naturally and easily went through the process, which had not taken more than 10 seconds from the moment I had begun to concentrate. Sure enough, the voice came back. "Greetings, you must now be lying down, ready to rest as you hear this message." And the whole message was repeated word for word as I had heard it the first time. Then I realized that somehow, that speech had been recorded in my brain, and that I could run and rerun it in my mind as often as I wanted to. I listened to it several times until I was finally overcome by sleep. The following day, it was soon time to go to the farm. My grandmother wanted to know whether I would go with her, but I declined, telling her that I would rather rest a little more, then later on I would go to our cocoa plantation, and pick some of the pineapples that we grew there in remarkable quantity. It had virtually become a ritual for me to go to that cocoa plantation as soon as I came from the city. I loved to be alone and meditate, and that plantation was my favorite place. I would go there, pick some cocoa pods from the trees, break them open, lie on my back, and suck the sweet juices from the white cool beans. My grandmother, who had always indulged me and let me do whatever I wanted to do, made no objections. She was used to seeing me go off in the forests by myself for long periods of times, and coming back when I wanted to. This morning, she instinctively knew that I wanted to be by myself. I waited for her to leave, to be absolutely sure that she would not follow me, and then after she had gone for a whole half hour, I set off for the cocoa plantation. It was just a short distance from our village. It took some 10 to 15 minutes walk to get there. Unlike the farm where my grandmother had to go to, it was 2 kilometers away and she had to cross a river and a swamp to get there. 2 beings appeared at the door. At last I headed toward the cocoa plantation, walking halfway through the village and at last turning behind the property of an old man called Michel Evander, where the trail to our plantation was. From Michel's property it is just 5 minutes walk to where I was going, and I soon left the trail and walked into our plantation. Many questions were swirling in my mind. I had been seeing those silvery flying things in the sky for as long as I could remember, to the point where they no longer were a novelty to me as such, but I had always wondered what the people who piloted them looked like. And now I could not help shaking with anticipation and excitement. Doubt swept my mind as I stood in the plantation, not knowing exactly where to go or what to do. Did I dream that message that I had listened to over and over again the night before? I decided that I did not, it would have been too incredible. Now, where would this silver thing be waiting, if indeed it were going to meet me? I asked myself aloud. At that moment I strongly felt that I should go toward a fairly large clearing at the edge of the plantation, where no cocoa trees had been planted. My mind went back to a few short years before, when my grandfather and I had solemnly buried one of our creations, a golem called Kima, in that very same clearing. I arrived at the clearing and stood there, feeling uneasy and also feeling remorseful that I had refused to go and help my grandmother at the other farm for no good reason. Suddenly I became aware of a distinct change in the immediate area of the forest surrounding me, and I was again covered in goose pimples. For I realized that for about 5 minutes, the birds had stopped singing, the crickets were quiet, no birds had flown overhead, and all the other insects had gone quiet. I slowly began to retreat under the cover of the cocoa trees, and immediately I heard the low humming sound that I guessed could only come from them. I finally looked up, and evidently there it was, now looking enormous as it was just about 20 meters above the ground. But it was really about 7 meters in diameter. A red light flashed at its bottom, and on top of it there was a white light also flashing. The lights were so strong that even though the sun was shining, I could see the flashes reflected strongly on the trunks and branches of trees. It was similar to the one I had seen the day before, and it also bore the same star and triangles logo. It came still closer and descended until it was about 3 meters above the ground. There seemed to be no door, either at the bottom or on the side facing me. The surface was perfectly smooth and uniform. I stood absolutely still, holding my breath and not even daring to blink, keeping my mind absolutely blank of any thoughts. I suppose that at that moment I would have been incapable of thinking if I had tried to. The low humming sound was reduced to what seemed to be its lowest level, then what seemed to be the outline of a door appeared on the smooth silver-colored side of the flying object facing me. The outline of the door was under the form of a white light. And I had guessed correctly, for the door opened and two beings appeared at the opening. One was brown-skinned, the other was white. Both of them were very tall, taller than the tallest human being I had ever seen. Both had long, shoulder-length hair and both looked perfectly human. The brown-skinned one's hair was black, the other's was blonde. And both wore brilliantly white long robes with long and ample wrist-length sleeves and no hoods. As the door had been opening, I had been slowly retreating even further under the trees, and when I saw the beings I gave way to terror and was about to scream or run away when the two beings crossed their arms on their chests in the Essene way. The brown one then raised both his hands, his fingers straight up in a typically Cameroonian calming gesture, and softly said in French, looking in my eyes, "Do not be afraid, Désiré." This had an immediate effect on me. I suddenly came to my senses and slowly walked back toward the clearing. How did they know my name? Who taught them how to greet people in the Essene way? The brown being who, in human terms would be known as being black, had kept his hands in the air all this time, and there was something vaguely familiar about him. I had the feeling that I had already met him somewhere. When I came to where I had been standing before, they moved back inside the silver vessel. Then a sort of ladder was lowered noiselessly down to 2 decimeters from the floor, and I was invited by a voice from the inside to climb up. But I remained on the same spot, making no attempt to move. After the invitation had been repeated 3 times and I had not responded, the ladder was withdrawn just as noiselessly as it had been lowered. Then a white light, that was exactly the breadth of the door, shot out from the machine and stopped at my feet. I felt myself rising up in the air. When I came to the same level with the door, the light withdrew, pulling me along with it and depositing me within the vessel but close to the door. The movement of the light had been very slow, and I guessed that the slowness had been deliberate. The two beings were standing about 2 meters from me, with friendly expressions in their physiognomies. I turned round to see that the door had silently been closed behind me. Again the white one put his arms across his chest, the right arm first and the left on top, bowed lightly to me and said, "Peace be with you." I automatically returned the greeting by bowing and crossing my arms in the same way. I looked around and saw that I was standing in a circular room of about 2.5 meters in diameter, illuminated by a soft white natural light that seemed to issue from the walls, the floor and the ceiling of the room. 3/4 of the sides of the walls were covered from waist level up to head level in hieroglyphic-like markings, illuminated buttons and small flickering lights. The front was a huge blank screen. 2 beings that I had at first thought to be children sat on 2 chairs facing the flickering lights. As I came in, they promptly stood up, turned toward me, bowed and smiled, giving me the same Essene greeting. I bowed as I stared in amazement, for those were not children at all. They both were very short, about 1.10 meters tall, with long black hair and black pointed beards. They looked like Chinese men, but when I looked closely, they had a greenish tint to their skin. In fact, if I could even say so, they did not look human, more like humanoid. Unlike the first 2 who had first appeared at the door of the vessel, these wore a grey flying uniform that seemed to be made of one piece of material that also comprised even the boots they were wearing. I say this because I did not see any visible zips or buttons on the uniforms. On their heads they wore very transparent shields that were nearly invisible, but these were noticeable because they contrasted with the grey color of the uniform. On their backs, there were 2 oblong bulges to which the shields were connected by slim tubes visibly delineated against the back of their necks. The oblong bulges were the same color as their uniforms. On the front of the uniforms and at the wrists, was imprinted the same star and triangle logo I saw on the flying vessel. These 2 little people looked quite similar, like brothers, but I could see some differences in their physiognomies that showed, even though they were of the same race, they were not biological brothers. The 2 beings sat down again and turned their attention to the flickering lights. "If you would care to follow us," said the white one of the 2 tall beings. They both turned and headed toward the side of the round wall that had just one light at ceiling level. After one last frowning look at the two small aliens, I turned round and followed them, and an entrance opened up as part of the wall slid away. And we got into another area of the vessel through a curving corridor into another room, where 3 other beings dressed in similar long white robes waited. This room was different from the first one that I had guessed could only have been the cockpit, or the bridge of the flying vessel. Though also lit by the same natural light here, it did not have too many of those little lights that I had seen, and there were not too many hieroglyphics like in the previous room, but there were still some here and there. On one side, quite integrated to the wall, but protruding a little, there was something that resembled a plasma television screen. Under it was an array of evenly spaced multicolored dots, about 200 in total. The floor of this room, just like the cockpit, was made of, or covered in a sparkling light metallic blue alloy. The beings who were in the room automatically also stood up when we entered. As I stood behind my companions, slightly hidden by their robes, these parted and revealed me to their sight. They, too, immediately bowed to me in the Essene manner, smiling with bonhomie. I timidly returned the greeting and waited, staring at them curiously. They too inspected me from head to toe, from the 2 red bows tied in my hair separated in 2 large buns, to my red and white polka dot dress with short puffed sleeves, to my transparent plastic sandals and white socks. But soon they checked themselves after looking at my 2 companions who seemed to me to be their superiors in rank. These others were 2 males and 1 female. But while one of the males was perfectly human-looking, the other one and the female, though human-like, their faces contrasted with those of the others, for they were very wide on top, but rather sharp at the chins. These faces were, if I may say, triangular, but still quite striking, and attractive to me. Their eyes were of a soft greenish-yellow color. The lady had very long hair that hung down her back. She was very slim and was not as tall as the others, but still about 6 feet tall, so, very tall for a female to me. She and the male who resembled her wore on their backs over their robes the same respiratory apparatus that the pilots in the cockpit wore. As I looked at their necks I saw that they wore the same space suits as the pilots, under the robes. My companions followed my rapid inspection of their colleagues with amusement, then they invited me to sit down. There were chairs that seemed to be built into the floor of the vessel. I could even go as far as saying that they were one with the floor, simply chair-shaped protruding excrescences that were part of the floor. The chairs were placed around a table that was also built into the floor like the chairs. And there was still enough room left between the furniture and the wall of the vessel. From what I could see, nothing stood loose or separated from the floor or walls of the vessel. As is always my habit, I inspected the room, imprinting everything in my memory before slowly sitting down. I was the last one to do so. My companions were extremely patient, not seeming to be in a hurry to engage in serious conversation, quietly observing me and waiting for me to be ready to listen to them. When I stopped looking around, the brown one, who was sitting next to me on my right, touched a gold-colored dot on the right arm of my chair, as all of them did the same on their respective seats. Simultaneously golden lights surrounded us at waist length like seat belts and from behind the shoulders to the waist. Indeed they acted as such, for the man told me. As you must have guessed, we came to talk to you, but we shall not remain here today. So we are going to take you to an isolated place where we may be at peace and undisturbed. As he spoke, I noticed that his companion was muttering a few words in an unknown language. Immediately the sides of the vessel became transparent, and I saw the plantation simply disappear as the vessel rocked slightly, stilted sideways, smoothly shot straight up into the sky and immobilized itself high up after about 1 minute. As it stopped, the transparency of the walls ceased. Then just as smoothly it shot horizontally in another direction, seemingly dropping in altitude as it did so, and immobilized itself again on what I guessed, as the walls became transparent again, was the highest peak of a mountain, since I saw lower peaks and further down, trees. The peak was covered in a light fog. Since we had left the cocoa plantation, I had been staring at the television screen where 2 lines with 3 dots had appeared. The white one of the 2 beings that had welcomed me at the door had been watching me all the time with a twinkle in his eyes. Then he said, "We have arrived." Then he touched the spot on the arm of his chair that released the seat belt, as did all the others. My seatbelt was released by the brown being on my right. "Where are we?" I asked. "Mount Cameroon," he replied, "the highest peak." "But how?" I exclaimed, still staring at the television screen. He smiled. "You are wondering if that is the trajectory we followed to come here, and how we managed to get here so soon," he said, pointing at the screen. "Well, yes. How did you know what I was thinking?" I asked. He smiled. "You yourself sometimes guess, or should I say know what other people are thinking, don't you?" "Ye.e.s," I replied slowly. "Well, that ability is latent in all humanoid beings, and it is very highly developed in us. We call it telepathy, and we helped you to use it." Suddenly I doubted him and I thought, yeah, right. Telepathy, my eye. You were looking at me while I looked at the screen. It does not take a genius to guess what I was thinking about. Then I looked at him, virtually daring him mentally to guess what I had just thought. But he just smiled, looking at me and shaking his head. His eyes seemed to probe deep down to my very soul. Suddenly, I felt ashamed at thinking that way. So I hid it by saying, "But how? When did you exactly help me? I do not understand." "That is why we came to Earth to see you. We have many things to tell you, many things to explain. And as for the way we travel, that is the proper way. Your people on Earth are doing it the wrong way, which is a shame. By the way, I mean the way their airplanes are powered. For with the nuclear energy now at Earth's disposal, they should be able to travel at 10 or 20 times at least the speed of their supersonic vessels, if only they knew how. I suppose that is sufficient for them for now. But they could do a lot better if only they would look into other methods. But for now we shall tell you who we are and why we are here." Well, I truly cannot comment on that. I don't know anything about planes, only that if I pay the right amount of money I can travel in them, I could not help saying stupidly. Then I continued, "My grandfather used to tell me about some brothers from the stars who shall come and visit me one day, and who shall continue to teach me the mysteries as he used to teach me, and even more things. He used to call them Elianin. Are you those people?" "Yes, we are," he replied patiently and smiling. "Where do you come from? Which planet? Which galaxy? Are you from this universe? Do you have names? And why do you two look so human if you are aliens, as you say?" His companion smiled discreetly. When I think about it now, I cannot help cringing at my rudeness at the time. But they understood that at 16 I was still nearly a child, and that I could not help being curious. No doubt they were reflecting that at that rate they were never going to be able at all to tell me what they had come to tell me. But those smiles actually made me understand that I should talk less and listen more. The conversation. He began. "We come from this universe, but from a planet in a galaxy many light years away from this one. It is very, very far away. In fact, Earth people do not know the name of our galaxy, and judging from what they know so far, they do not even know of the existence of our planets and even of our galaxy. You see, all the people present on this vessel today, myself included, are from different places. We do not all come from the same planet. Yes, I am not from Earth." He said this quickly as he saw me about to interrupt him. "Neither is my companion here," he added, pointing at the one who had welcomed me at the door with him, "but he and I are from the same planet. We are representatives of different solar systems in different galaxies. We are part of one of the interstellar alliances of galaxies and planets that comprise many planets of this universe. There are many such alliances in this part of space, and there are many other universes of which Earth people do not wish to acknowledge the existence. You see, space is infinite, and this universe is actually the smallest there is among those that we have been able to map in this part of space. There are others even larger. And we can tell you that we have even been able to leave this our universe, and to travel to the one nearest to ours. Not only that, we have already made contact with a civilized species there. Our wish is to awaken the whole of planet Earth into acknowledging our existence, and to bring it to openly become part of the interstellar alliance of which our respective planets are part. Earth is one of the particularly similar and inhabited planets in this galaxy that are isolated in such a way. In order to do this, We contact individuals from all continents of Earth to whom we give different tasks. Those individuals are advised to gather groups of people whom they then instruct of our existence, messages and teachings. All our attempts at persuading heads of states of Earth to acknowledge us and to inform their subjects of our existence have resulted in their refusing to help, and then covering up all information they had received. So in contacting individuals this way and appearing visibly with our vessels from time to time, we hope to reach as many humans as possible, to the point where people in power will have no choice but to sit up and take notice. Even when they refuse to notice, at least humanity will know about us through the groups formed by the individuals we contact. We have been doing this work for a long time now. But we have many enemies from other different galactic groups who have been opposing and fighting us for an even longer time, long before Adam's creation. Amongst them are a group of renegades, who will stop at nothing to sabotage our work and see us fail. Those renegades are a group who split from the original alliance that we formed, and who subsequently fought against us and opposed us when our latest work on this planet began. They gave us much trouble, several times, forcing us into destroying the work we had already done, and sabotaging any more work we did. To this day they have never ceased doing so. They have already begun contacting human individuals just like we are doing now, giving misleading stories to them about us in order to discredit us, and sowing doubt in people's minds, with the aim of usurping our position, and they contact humanity themselves in order to form an alliance with them and incite them into opposing us and fighting us when time comes. If that fight happens, the results would be very damaging for humanity, as it has already happened twice in the past. For those renegades have nothing to do with the existence of man on Earth. And they hate Earth people as much as they hate us. We had thought until now that we could successfully stop them from entering Earth's atmosphere and contacting human people, but unfortunately they have managed to slip through and to make their own contacts. In the past 10 years we have tried to calm our contactees on Earth by telling them that none but good interstellar aliens do reach this planet. However, our enemies have discredited us by deliberately contacting people with no useful purposes, sometimes even kidnapping people and experimenting on them, and terrifying and mutilating animals. All this is with the aim of sowing terror in the minds of the major part of Earth people. So now we have no other choice but to acknowledge their presence, and to alert Earth people to the existence and activities of their contactees, so that they may distinguish these from our own messengers. So yes, we have our groups on Earth and they have theirs. Earth is undergoing very major changes now. These changes are going to affect every human being, whether they accept our presence and believe us or not. It is our duty to prepare and awaken Earth's humanity for those changes. By changes, we mean that with the rapid progress in Earth's technology, changes are happening in the way people see and conceive things, changes in their beliefs. But something that we had always hoped would never happen is taking place today in France. That is why we came to talk to you today. We had always hoped we would never have to come to you, but now we have no choice. But what use could I possibly be to you? I am just a girl and a student, I am nobody, how can I help you? I do not understand. I interrupted him, completely astonished. In fact, I had been staring at him with my mouth widely open and frowning. We are coming to that, he replied patiently. The work you have to do for us is twofold. Your first duty is to write a book about our meetings and everything that we are going to tell you today and in the days that come, without leaving anything out. Then you will continue with the work you began with your grandfather. You will teach others what he taught you. We in turn will add to what he taught you and teach you more, and then you will do what he told you to do before he died. This time I began to interrupt him again, then changed my mind and stared at him with my mouth still slightly opened, now truly amazed. You see, your grandfather prepared you for this work, as we instructed him to. Already we are impressed by the way you have behaved yourself. Sometimes people that we contact are so frightened and disturbed at meeting us that we have to abort the missions and never contact them again. And that can set us back dozens of years before we contact someone else. Others cannot support direct contact like the one we are having now, and even though they end up being good messengers, we can only work with them in ethereal form and through channeling. Unfortunately, they end up confusing us with gods and angels, and we do not want that to happen this time. We insist that difference between us and angels be made obvious. You understand what channeling is, do you not? Yes, I do, I replied, nodding at the same time. You see, you are not afraid of us, and that is thanks to your grandfather's conditioning. He prepared you from since you were very little for this meeting. So our visit to you did not come as a complete surprise. Not at all. In fact, I have the habit of talking to you mentally and to wish to see you in the sky, I said enthusiastically. Yes, we know, and you have seen our vessels several times too, he said quietly. And every time you talk to us we know. Telepathy, that is what your grandfather taught you to do. There is no limit to how far you can transmit your thoughts, if you train yourself well, and when contact has at once been established. I know. Papa told me that. I said. That is how we all used to call my grandfather. Yes, he knew what he was talking about. Your grandfather was among the few enlightened masters of this century to have existed in Africa. I had the joy of meeting him several times, just like we met you today. We also helped him to understand many things that he would never otherwise have understood by himself. He had first learnt the traditions only as the ancient Hebrews had them, but our teachings helped him to understand the Essene teachings better. For the Essenes, unlike their Pharisee counterparts, were very much ahead of their time. They knew about us, and some of their leaders met us throughout the ages, including the late Rabbi Yeshua of Nazareth. Now coming back to you to answer your question, we contacted you to offer you to do this work because you chose to do it yourself. We are here simply to remind you of what you have to do. Me? How? And when did I do that? I exclaimed unbelievingly. Before you were born, he replied with a twinkle in his eyes again. Later, he said, raising his hand to stop the flow of questions that I was about to fire at him. Momentarily, we shall go and record in your brain the things we want you to write in a book, so that until you actually write them down and hopefully after, you will not forget them. We did not ask you to bring something to take down our message, that would have taken a much longer time. So we thought it better to record it directly into your brain, as that would make it easier for you to transcribe it without too many errors. When we have finished, we shall take you back before your old mother comes back from the farm. When we record the message, we shall put you to sleep, and when you awake, you will find yourself in the cocoa plantation. From there you shall make your own way home. So, just sit back and relax. My grandmother, I interjected firmly. Yes, very well then, your grandmother. As I said, today a man is being contacted in France by non-human aliens, also from a planet of this universe, who have been our enemies for many thousands of your Earth years. Their meeting with that man is aimed at the usurpation and sabotage of a monumental work that we began here on Earth, and that we are now beginning to see bear some of the fruit that we expected, and we have waited so long to see it bear. As we know those enemies of ours are going to give a lot of misleading information to that young man, so we, too, are here to give you, and through you to Earth people, our side of the story. You shall write a book about our meetings and have it published and distributed in all the countries where that man will sell his book. Then you shall also establish centers in countries where he will establish his, or at least have representatives there. They will be able to make your book known and our message available to his followers. In those centers you will also teach and train your followers, as we have said. You shall go in person to those countries whenever possible, and advise his followers before they commit themselves to something they would come to inevitably regret later, something that if it is accepted or rejected, has for a prize the loss or salvation of their own immortal souls. Let humanity make their minds up freely after having known both stories. It is because what we are going to tell you is quite long that we did not ask you to bring notebooks, as taking notes would take you too long and you might not write everything down as we would like you to. So we are going to use a method that we have already used in the past with people we have contacted. People like Moses, Ezra, Isaiah, Ezekiel and many others. We will imprint, or record the message straight to your brain. Yes, that is exactly what we did yesterday. All you will have to do is rerun it at home and write it down word for word. Do you follow me? He asked with a smile. I nodded. Very well, if you would just care to follow me, he said, getting up. But I did not move. I folded my arms and stubbornly looked down, refusing to get up. You said that the young man being contacted is in France. Why did you not go to someone in France with your message?
That would have been easier. Somebody there would have been more suitable and useful than I. I am only an African girl. What can I do?
And I am black. We do have problems with skin colors on this planet. If you did not know, what could I do? Who would listen to me? And where would I find the means to have a book published? Why me? I cannot do it. I want to go home. I was raising my voice now and becoming hysterical. Calm down, he said. Do not worry about that. Please, follow me. I stood up and shouted. No, take me home. I want to go home. Who will listen to such a crazy story anyway? This is all madness. I am mad, and you are not real. Take me home. I was now screaming, stamping my foot on the floor but producing no noise as I hoped to. The female alien, alarmed, looked at the others, and retreated further into the background. The brown alien waited for me to finish screaming and said calmly, I will be with you throughout. But if you definitely do not want to proceed, we will of course take you back. He held my gaze all the time while he said this, and I calmed down. Somehow, I was willing to listen to him, and liked him more than the others. I finally got up and followed him. A panel slid at one side of the wall and we entered in a room in which was a piece of furniture resembling a hospital bed, but much lower. It was, however, for human-sized patients. The brown man told me to drink it. When I did, I realized that it was very sweet, very good and tasted like honey but a bit mint-like too. Hare, didn't you say that I'd wake up in the plantation? I asked, smiling. Ah, yes. We said so, didn't we? We decided that we could awaken you while still inside this vessel. You handled the first encounter well, so there was no need to leave you asleep in the plantation, to awaken by yourself. As I was led to the outside door, all the crew stood up, smiling, their arms crossed to their chests. I realized that we were back in my grandfather's plantation. This time I walked down the stairs, then I turned around when I stepped on the ground. The same two men who had first appeared to me now stood at the door, their right arms raised in a farewell gesture. I, too, crossed my arms to my chest and said aloud, Peace be with thee. The door was closed and the space vessel slightly rose, lights changing as it did so, and it shot up very fast, tipped slightly on the side and disappeared in an instant. I stood there for some time, looking up in the direction where the space vessel had disappeared. Then slowly, life came back in the plantation and its surroundings. The birds began to sing again, the crickets also made their noises heard. And I slowly started back for the village. That night I went immediately to bed after dinner.